I was 7 when the world I trusted quietly cracked. My 7th birthday had been a small affair, a homemade cake with lemon frosting, a few classmates crowded into the living room, balloons clinging to the ceiling. I had spent weeks planning it, even drawing invitations on lined paper with shaky letters, imagining laughter echoing around our modest home. I wanted just one day where I felt seen, celebrated, loved. My parents, Marlo and Celine Arkwright, had promised me something special. "We'll be there," my mother said, her voice soft but distracted, glancing at her phone as if she had a more important world to attend to. "We wouldn't miss it for anything," my father added, tapping his watch like they were balancing calendars instead of a child's happiness. But they didn't come. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a moment like this. Your like and share can carry this story to someone who needs hope, healing, or strength today. Red heart. Not that day, not in the evening when the cake was sliced, or when friends gathered to sing and clap. They simply vanished into excuses, a last-minute meeting, a delayed flight, a sudden emergency. I waited by the window for hours, watching neighbors walk dogs and delivery trucks pass, imagining at any moment the familiar car would pull into the driveway. But it never did. I remember the sting of the empty house. My friends had all left eventually, carrying their party favors and laughter with them. I sat on the edge of the sofa, sticky frosting on my hands, staring at the balloons drooping in disappointment. The sound of silence was heavier than any words. That's when I understood something a child shouldn't. Their absence was deliberate. Years later, I would realize that absence had been the first lesson in control. It had taught me that people could act without conscience, that love could be conditional, and that patience could be sharper than anger. After that, life became a series of small betrayals. My parents were not cruel in ways that screamed. They were subtle, calculating. My achievements in school were ignored. My first award in science, a trophy I had worked months for, disappeared into a drawer, never celebrated. When I got a scholarship for an advanced program, my parents' response was a clipped, "Good. Don't expect a party." The world they built around me was one where I existed only to reflect their image. My success, my happiness, they were irrelevant unless it made them look good. By the time I was a teenager, I had learned to speak carefully, to act cautiously, and most importantly, to observe silently. Their glances, their half-smiles, the sighs when I mentioned college or my first internship, every small gesture became a clue. It wasn't until my early 20s when I started managing my own small digital art business that I realized the full scope of their cunning. I had just finished a project for a local gallery, a commission that would be my first big break. I had saved every dollar, poured late nights into perfecting the work, and finally felt the pride of accomplishment. But then, one morning, I discovered that my business account had been drained. Not all of it, just enough to be catastrophic. At first, I couldn't believe it. Perhaps I had mismanaged funds. Maybe there was a technical error, but the pattern was clear. Someone had exploited my trust. Someone who had always had access to the minutiae of my life. They had registered accounts under my name, siphoned payments meant for me, and used my identity to enroll in online courses, amassing certifications they had no intention of using. The betrayal cut deeper than the absence at my birthday party ever had. This time, it wasn't just neglect. It was theft. It was premeditated. The people who were supposed to guide me, to protect me, had weaponized my own life against me. I sat in my small apartment that night, staring at the glowing numbers on my laptop, heart hammering. Every email alert, every notification of suspicious activity was a ghost from my past, reminding me that the child who had waited alone on a sofa for her parents had grown, but the lessons they taught had not left her. That was when I made a decision. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't confront them blindly. I would understand the pattern trace it, and reclaim what was mine. I hired a forensic financial consultant named Veda Calder. Veda had a reputation for uncovering fraudulent networks, tracking identity exploitation with precision. I handed her the raw data, emails, transaction histories, course enrollments, and one simple instruction: follow the thread wherever it leads. Every email, every signature, every payment from 2012 onward. As Veda dug, I thought about my 7th birthday, the frosting smudged on my hands, the balloons drooping like forgotten dreams. That day had been a lesson in silence, and now silence became my strategy. I couldn't let emotion dictate my actions. Anger without a plan would leave me empty. Strategy and patience would be my weapons. Veda called me 3 weeks later. The findings were astonishing, but not entirely surprising. My parents, Marlo and Celine, had not just drained my business account. They had created a shadow persona under my identity to enroll in high-fee online courses, claiming scholarships and certifications, selling the certificates to third parties, and redirecting revenue streams into accounts under their control. Each transaction was a breadcrumb leading to the larger pattern of exploitation. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the laptop open, hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm tea, staring at the screen. I felt that same chill I had felt as a child, the realization that someone you trust can weaponize your life. But now, unlike then, I had the knowledge, the power, and the patience to respond. It wasn't about revenge in the impulsive sense. It was about justice, a slow and deliberate unraveling of every lie and deception, turning their tools against them. I would use the very systems they thought they controlled to expose them. Every enrollment form, every redirected payment, every false signature, Veda traced it all. By the end of that night, a plan had taken shape in my mind. I would confront them, yes, but not in anger. I would expose them where they had once believed they were untouchable, in the digital spaces, the administrative networks, the legal and educational structures they had manipulated. For the first time in decades, I felt a quiet surge of purpose. I wasn't the abandoned child anymore. I was someone who had learned to see patterns, to wait, and to act decisively. The first step in reclaiming my life would be the hardest, preparing them to believe they could continue getting away with it. Only then would they truly understand the consequences of their choices. The red balloons of my forgotten birthday floated somewhere in my memory, a faint echo. But now, they no longer marked loss. They marked the beginning of awareness, the first spark of strategy that would guide the next chapters of my life, and the reckoning that was coming. For weeks, Veda worked like a ghost haunting the digital remnants of my life. Every email, every transaction, every online enrollment forged under my name became a thread, and she pulled them one by one, unraveling a tapestry of deception. What shocked me wasn't just the audacity of Marlo and Celine, it was the meticulousness. They had planned it so carefully that any casual observer would see only ordinary administrative mistakes. Only someone patient, someone who had studied the patterns, could recognize the traces of exploitation. I spent my nights beside her, reviewing each discovery. The faint glow of the monitor lit the outlines of my hands, tracing the contours of invoices and enrollment confirmations. I felt the same chill I had felt on my 7th birthday, but this time it was different. It was charged with purpose, not abandonment. One of the earliest discoveries was a series of fraudulent course enrollments in my name. Marlo had opened accounts on prestigious online platforms, registering for expensive certifications and claiming scholarship refunds. Every refund had been rerouted into a dormant account she controlled. They had stolen not just money, but credibility and opportunity. While I was building my career, they were siphoning success out of my identity. "Look here," Veda said one evening, pointing at a spreadsheet filled with dates, amounts, and account numbers. "Notice the patterns. They always enroll on birthdays or anniversaries of your achievements. It's psychological manipulation. They choose moments that matter most to you. I leaned back, fists clenched around my mug of coffee, trying to control the tremor in my hands. My parents weren't just thieves. They were cruel in ways I hadn't fully comprehended. They had perfected the art of emotional sabotage, intertwining financial exploitation with the old wounds they had inflicted. The deeper we dug, the more I realized this wasn't just about money. They had crafted a narrative where I was dependent, unseen, and powerless. Every stolen dollar, every redirected payment was a reminder that they believed I could never challenge them. But I had something they never considered: time, patience, and focus. By the third week, Veda had traced nearly all the fraudulent transactions back to a network of shell accounts, some of them even tied to businesses they controlled openly. They had been using my identity as collateral to enroll in programs, bid on contracts, and funnel revenue. And every move was documented: emails, IP addresses, timestamps, proof that could not be dismissed. I remember the night it clicked. I was alone in the apartment, staring at the patterns on the screen. The glow of the laptop reflected in my eyes, showing me the shape of revenge taking form. I wasn't going to scream or confront them in anger. I wasn't going to call them and accuse them like a child. Instead, I would let their own actions speak, exposing their betrayal with precision. The next morning, I drafted the first letters, not legal threats yet, just careful, deliberate communication. I addressed the administrators of the online platforms, the financial institutions that had been duped into processing their fraud. Every sentence was measured, every word deliberate. No emotion, no exaggeration, only facts. The factual weight would hit harder than any tirade of anger. Then came the hardest part: contacting my parents. Not directly. Of course, they still believed I would respond emotionally, that I could be manipulated. I sent carefully phrased emails, posing as administrative follow-ups, inquiring about account discrepancies. The subtlety was key. Every response they sent, every defensive gesture, became another piece of evidence. And they took the bait. Marlo replied first, with a clipped, superior tone. "If there's a problem, handle it yourself. We've been busy." Celine followed days later, her email dripping faux concern. "We never intended harm. Surely you're exaggerating." I read each carefully, noting inconsistencies, half-truths, and contradictions. Each message became a dagger of proof, a demonstration of their ongoing exploitation. Meanwhile, Veda discovered an even more audacious layer. They had taken control of my freelance art accounts, bidding on commissions under my name but redirecting payments to themselves. Clients had been unknowingly funding their schemes for years. Every invoice, every confirmation, every signed agreement became evidence in the growing dossier of betrayal. I realized the confrontation could not be casual. It had to be meticulously staged, a moment where every lie, every theft, every manipulation they had ever performed would be undeniable. I began drafting a plan, a sequence of revelations that would leave them no room to deny, excuse, or escape responsibility. Veda and I decided the setting would be neutral but controlled, a small conference room at a legal advisory office. I didn't need a courtroom. I needed exposure, witnesses, and documentation. The room would be the stage, and their disbelief would be the weapon I wielded. I started assembling the pieces: copies of all emails, transaction records, screenshots of fraudulent accounts, client statements, and online enrollment confirmations. Each document was carefully labeled, cross-referenced, and time-stamped. Every layer of deception was laid bare, every subtle pattern cataloged. Through it all, I thought about the 7-year-old me, sitting alone on that sofa, watching balloons droop with disappointment. I thought about how silence had been my only companion then. And now, silence would become my strategy, letting their own web of deceit collapse under scrutiny. Finally, the night before the confrontation, I sat with the complete dossier spread across my dining table. My hands hovered over the papers, tracing the paths of their exploitation. I felt no vengeance in the traditional sense, not the screaming, not the rage, but a quiet satisfaction in preparation, in knowing that the next day their carefully constructed facade would crumble. I whispered to myself, almost inaudibly, "The child you abandoned is ready, not to cry, not to beg, but to reclaim what is hers. You never saw me coming." Veda placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "Tomorrow they'll see everything, and there's nothing they can do to stop it." I nodded. The thought brought a strange calm. 30 years of lessons, 30 years of patience, 30 years of survival, all leading to this moment. I wasn't the powerless child anymore. I was someone who understood systems, patterns, and consequences. And tomorrow, Marlo and Celine would learn what it meant to betray someone who had nothing left to lose, but everything to prove. The sun rose faintly, filtering through my blinds, painting the room in soft gold. I folded the documents neatly, placing them in a secure briefcase. Each fold, each stack, was a reminder of every moment they had underestimated me. The next day, the conference room would become a stage. And on that stage, I would wield the truth like a scalpel, precise, sharp, and unstoppable. The day of confrontation arrived like a quiet storm. I woke early, the city still half asleep, streets glistening from last night's rain. My hands felt steady as I packed the briefcase. Every document carefully arranged, every email printed, every financial record cross-checked. 30 years of lessons, 30 years of patience, all distilled into this moment. The conference room was unassuming, neutral, almost sterile. A long table stretched from one end to the other, chairs waiting like silent witnesses. I had requested a few impartial witnesses, a representative from the online platforms, a financial advisor familiar with identity fraud, and Veda, my consultant, who had been the unseen architect of my case. Marlo and Celine arrived punctually, confident, smiling with that familiar air of entitlement. They didn't glance at me as they passed, assuming I was still the timid child they could manipulate. I let them settle, letting the silence stretch, allowing the tension to thicken. Silence, I had learned, was more potent than confrontation. Marlo began, voice smooth, rehearsed. "We're here to resolve a misunderstanding. Surely there's no need for dramatics." Celine nodded, her smile tight, eyes darting around, as if gauging the witnesses for support. But they hadn't considered one critical detail. I had built an irrefutable trail of evidence. I opened the briefcase and laid out the documents in precise stacks like a battlefield map, each stack representing a year of calculated theft, every transaction a footprint they had left behind. "Do you recognize these?" I asked calmly, placing the first printed email in front of Marlo. He glanced at it quickly, then shrugged. "It's probably a clerical error." I smiled faintly, the corners of my mouth curling not with anger, but with the quiet certainty of inevitability. "A clerical error." I repeated softly, letting the words hang in the room like smoke. "Perhaps." But when paired with these, I flipped to the next page, showing account redirection forms and enrollment confirmations in my name. "You enrolled in over 50 online programs under my identity, redirecting every scholarship, refund, and certification fee to accounts you control. Do you still think this is clerical?" Celine's lips parted, then closed, a subtle tremor running through her hands. Her practice calm was cracking. I continued, my voice measured, unwavering. "For years, you used my identity to siphon money, redirect business revenue, and profit from opportunities that belonged to me. You assumed I would remain powerless, that I would never see the pattern. But I did. Veda stepped forward, distributing copies of the evidence to the witnesses. Every detail, meticulously documented, left them no room for denial. Emails bore timestamps, financial institutions confirmed account redirections, clients verified fraudulent commission payments. Each piece reinforced the previous, forming a chain that was impossible to break. Marlowe tried again, voice strained. You're exaggerating. This isn't. But I cut him off, calm and precise. It isn't exaggeration. This is documentation. These are your choices. And you're going to acknowledge them today, publicly, or your credibility will vanish. The conference room grew tense. The witnesses reviewed the files, their expressions shifting from polite interest to astonishment. One by one, they began asking pointed questions, confirming the authenticity of the records. Marlowe and Celine faltered under scrutiny, their rehearsed confidence collapsing. Celine finally whispered, almost pleading, We didn't think you'd find out. I leaned forward slightly, voice soft but cutting, each word deliberate. You underestimated me. You thought I was still that little girl waiting for a birthday. That never happened. You thought I would remain silent while you manipulated my life. But silence isn't weakness, it's preparation. For the first time in decades, I saw fear reflected in their eyes. Not anger, not indignation. Fear. The same fear I had felt as a child when realizing the adults I trusted could betray me. Only now, the tables had turned. I went through the documents, one by one, each revelation a controlled strike. The fraudulent enrollments, the redirected business payments, the emails proving intent, they all landed with precision. The witnesses confirmed every point, the evidence indisputable. By the end, Marlowe and Celine were visibly shaken, their carefully constructed facade reduced to fragments. They opened their mouths to protest, but the room held no room for excuses. The proof was relentless. Their exploitation, their betrayal, their calculated cruelty, all documented and verified, was laid bare. I paused, letting the silence stretch, letting them absorb the full weight of exposure. Then I closed the briefcase, leaning back in my chair. The calm in my posture contrasted sharply with the storm inside them. This, I said, voice quiet but sharp, is what happens when someone you underestimate spends 30 years learning, observing, and preparing. You thought you could profit from my absence, exploit my identity, and continue as if nothing happened. But the consequences are now inescapable. Every act you committed has been accounted for. Tears welled in Celine's eyes. Marlowe's hands shook slightly. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply let the truth stand, unyielding, undeniable. The witnesses nodded, acknowledging the scope of the evidence. Emails, bank records, online enrollments, each piece pointed to one conclusion. Marlowe and Celine Arkwright had betrayed their child, and the child they tried to silence had reclaimed her voice. After the session, I left the room quietly, Veda following. Outside, the world continued, unaware of the confrontation that had shifted decades of power. But for me, something fundamental had changed. I had reclaimed control over my identity, my work, and my life. The betrayal that had haunted me since age 7 no longer dictated my reality. Months later, I established a foundation, the Lumen Project, dedicated to supporting young adults whose identities or achievements had been exploited, helping them protect their digital presence and financial independence. Every day, I reminded myself that survival wasn't enough. Reclamation and empowerment were what mattered. I never confronted Marlowe and Celine again after that day. They remained in the background, their influence diminished, unable to harm me further. And I carried forward not anger, but a quiet strength built on knowledge, patience, and resilience. Looking back, I realized that betrayal is only as powerful as the control you give it. The birthday I had spent alone taught me one truth. Absence can wound, but preparation can heal. Exploitation can steal, but vigilance can reclaim. And while I could never erase the past, I could shape the future, my future, on my own terms. The moral I took with me, carried like a talisman, was simple yet profound. The world may abandon you, exploit you, or underestimate you, but patience, knowledge, and self-belief are weapons no one can steal. Reclaim your life quietly, decisively, and make your own story unassailable. And in that quiet reclamation, I finally felt free.